Back to the story of the low down dirty dog that is the king, who's out there running behind his lady's back, and then she's all mad and everyone's like, she's the bad guy. What?
Yeah. Well, she wants to cook the children and serve them to her husband.
And she's like, this is fucking normal.
Yeah.
I fucking hate this story.
I do too.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Cracking Spines Podcast. I'm here with Candice. If you're new here, please tell everyone you know about this podcast. Rave about it. Tell them it's the most amazing thing you've ever heard. And if you don't do this, then that'll let us know that you're a horrible person and we don't like you. We wanted to apologize to everybody for last month. We kind of may have ruined the idea of romance, possibly family, carnivals, and love.
Yeah, welcome back and thank you for coming back.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. And if you are looking to sponsor one of these episodes, this would be the spot where we talk about your product and we were like, oh, it's really good. We actually looked at it because we are only going to be really discussing products that we can stand behind. So if you have integrity in your company, we love integrity in people. Let's do it.
And our listeners will know that if we're talking about it, we mean it.
Yeah, full send. Just fruit for thought. Speaking of fruit, we are going to be talking about the Fruitful Sleep motif in our installment of the original folk and fairy tales for the month of March. All of these books that we use for our show, you can find them on our store at kit.co/Cracking Spines Podcast. Every single one of them are there. We are primarily working out of the Great Fairy Tale Tradition by Jack Sipes. There are 2 books for this month, so if you're only going to buy one of them, that's the one to get. The Fruitful Sleep motif you may know as Sleeping Beauty, but it's not your Disney version. We can talk about that a little bit later. As always, listener discretion is advised.
Major trigger warning today.
We will be talking about sexual assault.
All right, so the Fruitful Sleep is the motif that the stories of what most people know as Sleeping Beauty fit within. So the 3 fairy tales that we're going to be reading today are Sun, Moon, Talia by Giambattista Basile, Sleeping Beauty by Charles Perrault, and Briar Rose by the Brothers Grimm.
Yes. The first formation of this motif was believed to be in the 14th century. Celandine is given gifts by 3 goddesses, but offends one and is sentenced to eternal sleep. Eternal sleep is the constant motif here, the fruitful sleep. We should talk about what it means by fruitful sleep. This is a term that's going to come up later. Fruitful is representative of a woman's ability to procreate.
Bear children.
To bear children. So in this original story, Celandine meets Troilus before suffering her fate and they fall in love. When she falls into her eternal sleep, her creepy dad puts her naked body in a high tower. Yes, I added the creepy part. Troilus is given help by a quote unquote kind spirit, which I found was a funny way to say fraternity brother, to get to Celandine's through a window. Troilus then date rapes her because they never had that conversation, as evidenced by her distress of losing her virginity, then blames it on the influence. He blames it on the influence of Venus. Look at that. Man blaming women for him doing something. Interesting. It's like nothing's changed. Her baby gets snatched. She cries and gets over it because, you know, that's what women do. The anonymous author is clearly a dude at this point.
Yeah. Tell me this was written by a man without telling me this was written by a man.
I got you. Her baby gets snatched. She cries and then gets over it because she's thinking about Troy.
There it is.
Yeah, put her rapist before her baby. That's cool. So why don't we start out with Giambattista Basile's Sun, Moon, and Talia. We wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on the authors as we move into this. Throughout this month, you're going to see these 3 authors come up often, and then there's 2 other authors we will be talking about in the future, but we'll get to those when we get to those episodes.
So Basile is the first of our 3 authors that has taken the tradition that you just talked about, the tradition of the fruitful sleep, and has turned it into his version of a fairy tale, which is Sun, Moon, Talia. So Basile was born in 1575. He was an Italian poet, a fairy tale collector, and his collections included some of the oldest forms of really well-known European fairy tales. His Le Conto della Conti, which translates roughly to the story of stories, was basically about 50 zestful tales. And it was one of the earliest collections of folk and fairy tales that served as a really important source for Perrault, as well as Brothers Grimm, who we're going to talk about later.
So let's just get into Sun, Moon, and Talia. Giambattista Basile. I love that whole, I love the name of it. It's not the same name as like Sleeping Beauty or Briar Rose, which makes sense because of the brambles and the briar and all that jazz.
But the title's not on the nose. You get halfway through it and you're like, oh, that's what Sun, Moon, Talia means.
Yeah.
Like, I like that about this. And it starts very much the way you would think a lot of Sleeping Beauty stories would start. King and queen have a daughter.
But what happens is usually the king and queen have an issue conceiving a child. And finally, through perseverance, I guess you could call it,
right?
They end up getting pregnant and they have a daughter. So the king usually has this huge feast, party, extravaganza situation, and they invite either wise women or fairies or whoever to come and sit down and bless their child and tell of the child's fate.
And in the case of Basile's story, we start with wise men who who come and tell of Talia's fate.
Yeah.
So after the wise men consulted with each other, they basically predict that a piece of flax will be her undoing.
Yeah, a piece of flax. And of course, in almost every single one of these stories, the father tempts fate.
Yeah.
He asks to have all spindles removed, all spinning wheels and spindles removed, all the flax removed from the kingdom, the castle. And of course, in doing this, they always miss one.
And create a curiosity.
Yeah, and create a curiosity. And, the princess sees a spinner going by and asks, what is that? Can you come up here and teach me? And gets a little too hasty. And of course, grabs onto, I believe, the string, gets a piece of flax under her seat, falls down like she's dead.
Right.
The spinning woman had no idea everything had been removed from the kingdom and that was there to protect her. Had no idea, runs to get help. And so her father comes in, finds her, strips her down naked for, I don't know, whatever reason, because he's a weirdo.
Puts her in a velvet chair under
like a chaise lounge.
Yeah, under almost a canopy in a palace that's situated in the middle of the country.
Yes.
So that's where we leave.
She's about 15.
Talia.
She's about 15 at this point.
So then we jump ahead, and sometime later, a king is out hunting, and that's where he comes across.
Oh, the king. So the king is out hunting and he loses his falcon. Falcons actually do have some symbolism to them.
Yes, there's birds in each book, right?
Almost every single one.
Right.
So the symbolism behind a falcon, particularly in the Renaissance, which this is close to the Renaissance, represents the hope that light will illuminate the darkness of her forever sleep that she's under.
Right. So the king loses his falcon, and that's how he wanders upon this scene.
I think it's important to note that after her dad was like, yo, put the naked chick in the middle of the castle, in the middle of the town, we're all getting out of here.
Yep.
We're just going to leave her here. I can't bear with this. I can't deal with it. And he's just out the door.
Right. And
like full abandonment.
Basile doesn't signify a time, like 100 years or anything like that.
Yeah, nothing like that.
Some time has passed, and a king loses his falcon and wanders upon Talia.
Yes.
And not looking for her, had not heard the stories. Like
nothing.
He just stumbles across naked woman in a chaise lounge.
Finally, he reached the room in which Talia was sitting as if under a magic spell. And as soon as the king saw her, he thought she was asleep. So he called to her, but she did not wake. No matter how much he touched her, she did not wake. Her beauty, however, set him afire. Okay. He got a boner. And he carried her in his arms to a bed. She's still passed out, like comatose, where he gathered the fruits of love. That's where fruitful sleep comes in. And then left her asleep in the bed.
Right.
Like hit it, quit it, wham, bam. Thank you, princess. And just out the door. Right. And he returned to his own kingdom where for a long time he forgot all about what had happened.
Right.
So my note there was, you do this raping shit a lot? Your Highness? Is this like a common thing for you just to happen upon women and just lay the pipe and leave?
Yeah.
How many kids do you think this man has? We can get into that later.
That's a whole other episode.
Yeah. So Talia becomes pregnant.
Right.
And she gives birth while
still asleep.
Okay. So she has these children in her sleep at some point. One of them confuses her finger for her nipple. Good for her.
Right. Because she's not cursed. This isn't the Disney version or the version that most people know when they think Briar Rose.
Yeah.
She's not cursed to a sleep. The flax put her into a sleep, and it's been there this entire time. So while one of the babies...
And it was under her nail.
Right. So a baby nursing, mistaking her finger, was able to just pluck it right out, and...
She wakes up.
Oh, she wakes up to twins.
And she's like, this is fucking normal.
Yeah.
Love my children.
Yes. So she awakes from a deep sleep, and when she saw the two jewels by her side, she clasped them to her breast and held onto them as dear as life. So she just immediately develops this bond and was just like, okay.
I mean, I've heard skin to skin does like great things, but
you usually know how you got there.
Yeah. Like of course, because, my brain is just wired wrong. I just imagine her like not even noticing the babies while they're like suckling on her. And she's just like, stands up and just has like two twins hanging from her.
Just swinging from
her knockers.
Basile says she did not know what happened or how she had come to be alone in the palace with two babies at her side, nor did she have any idea who was bringing them things to eat. So to your point, she's completely in the dark as to what happened. Right about now, the king remembers Talia.
All of a sudden. He's like, oh yeah, I raped that one chick. I wonder what she's up to.
I should go check on her, see how she's doing.
And it's not that he like remembered her and knew that she was awake. He went back for seconds.
Yeah. And it says, found her awake, and with two masterworks of beauty, he went out of his mind with joy. So he tells Talia who he is and what had happened, and they develop a friendship and a strong bond. So Basile kind of goes that route. Like they develop a bond, but it versus the other
king's like, I don't like labels.
Yeah.
I'm just, like I'm at a really weird place in my life.
It's
right
not
now.
this intense love that we read about in the other two stories.
Oh, no. This isn't a king's crown. No, I'm a prince. Like, no. What's the tan line on my finger? Nothing.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Right.
Like, I just happen to wear a lot of jewelry. And that one.
They've got this
stuck for a
like
while.
strong co-parenting thing going on.
Oh yeah. Like he's like, you take care of the kids. I'm going to bounce for a while.
Right.
I'll be back at some point, I guess.
Is this he remains, and I circle this, he remains for several days.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Those several days. Very helpful. Then he took leave with promise to return and take her back to his kingdom. So now we follow along on the king's side where he goes back and we discover, oh, shock of all shock, he's married.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's like,
worst spoiler ever. Like,
she's like, wait a minute. First of all, they called him a king.
Yeah.
You need a queen, bro. Behind every king is a good queen.
Yeah.
Right. He goes back and he's like, yo, what's up, lady? And she's like, hey, honey. And he's like, yeah, cool. He goes to sleep and he's like, oh, yeah, sun, moon, Talia. Oh, by the way, sun and moon are the name of her kids. Wifey is like, who the hell is Talia?
Yeah.
What? And he's like still asleep. She's like, I'm going to find out some shit. Mm-hmm. So she starts questioning people, specifically like his secretary.
She corners the guy and just scares the ever-living crap out of him.
I mean, do you blame her?
No, not at all.
I'm like, girl, get that info.
He's doing what when he's out with his falcon?
And and the guy is like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, I can either make you rich or I can fuck your shit up. Which one do you want?
So the queen goes from kind of scary, jealous wife to goddamn real fast. So she sends him out.
And that's only halfway for her.
So she sends the secretary in the king's name to Talia. So
I smell a setup.
So the secretary goes to Talia and is like, I'm here on behalf of your baby daddy. Mm-hmm. He wants to see his children.
Not you.
He wants to see his children. I'm here to collect the kids. And
she's like, okay, perfect, stranger. Just take my kids.
I love that he's being involved in their life.
She's like, my knockers are getting really sore.
I could use a me time.
Yeah.
She's
like, I need to find someone to put in this courtesy stitch.
So it turns out that the reason the queen wants them, not to confront the husband, she wants to cook them.
Oh, she wants
has immediately gone to, I want them brought back here so that I can cook them.
And she's like, they're saying so she can return them to the body from whence they came.
Yeah, she wants to cook the children and serve them to her husband.
Talia was the one that turned like whatever food was being fed to her by the fairies into two human beings. He did none of the work. He date raped her and lucked out that she was just like, yeah, this is totally normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I fucking hate this story.
I do too.
If I met this king, it would be on site. Like,
I'm here in the name of Talia.
Yeah, fuck that. I would stand behind the queen like, yeah, what she said. I'd be her hype man so hard.
Well, unfortunately for the queen,
yeah,
the cook can't bring himself to do it, saves the children, hides them with his wife.
And serves up some lamb.
Tells the queen that it's the children, so she feeds that to the king and
And
eat away, you're eating what's your own. Eat away, you're eating what's your own, which pisses him the hell off.
Well, first of all, when I wrote next to that, petty. I like it. Mm-hmm. I don't really agree with what she thought she was doing, but I really admired the motivation. She's
the first one to actually have motivation.
Yeah, first, like, is she the antagonist or protagonist? I feel like she's the anyway.
Think about it. Like, Talia's been this.
Talia is an object.
The king is mindless, so the queen is.
Talia's an idiot. Like, she doesn't do anything.
The queen's the first person with motive.
Yeah.
And any sort of
emotional range.
Exactly.
And hell hath no
backstory.
Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And
for sure.
I think that should be the moral of the story, but it's not. Surprise, shocker. Mm-hmm. He finally responded, I know I'm eating what's mine. You never brought anything into this house. So then he gets up in a rage and goes out into the country to calm his anger.
That was not enough to fill the rage. She sends the secretary back for Talia.
She's like, I know I said you just got to do this one thing. However.
So he goes to Talia and he's like, now he'd like to see you. Talia comes running because she's excited to see the king. As soon as the queen sees Talia, she becomes just incredibly enraged and embittered.
Oh, she's upset.
This is the line. You are the bitch that has driven my head bonkers.
Well, you've landed in purgatory and I'm going to make you pay for all the harm you've done to me. This is where I started to fall off the queen's favor. She's actively victim blaming now.
Yeah. She's in full on, everybody in the situation needs to be punished because I'm unhappy.
When Talia heard this, she tried to excuse herself and say that it was not her fault, that her husband had taken possession of
her territory
while she had been asleep.
Fruit, territory, farming, all of just keep coming up. So that
fertility.
Again, we're going back to what you had mentioned in the beginning, which is
this is what fruitful sleep
this is what fruitful sleep means. But none of this is working on the queen. She's just resolute in it, and Talia realizes that things have taken a turn, and so she kneels down before the queen and begs her to let her take her clothes off before she's murdered.
Oh yeah, because the queen is like, we're throwing you in a fire pit.
And so Talia, realizing she's not getting out of this, there's no way that she can be like, your king did this to me. When this has taken a turn, she just basically falls down on her knees and says, please allow me to take off all of the beautiful clothing that I'm adorned in before you throw me in. So she's
like, let me buy some time. Like, because this is back in the 1600s, or it's written from the perspective of somebody back in like the the late 17th century. And they had like 85,000 pieces that they had to wear. So she's like, slowest striptease ever.
Mm-hmm. She's uttering cries and bemoaning with each article of clothing. So she's making a spectacle of herself to just draw this out.
Oh yeah. And not just that, but it also throws some of that imagery in there of like, she wasn't able to do that when he took advantage of her. Mm-hmm. Just so happens the two timing, good for nothing.
King rides back in,
causes some shit, and then runs out and leaves everybody else to deal with the problem.
The ladies are fighting. Oh no.
They're fighting over me. Well, you see how handsome I am.
But then she says, and you ate your children.
Oh yeah. He's like, and I fed your kids to you.
That he responds to.
And he's like, hold on, you're coming after my side piece, but at the same time, like, you fed me my kids. Mm-hmm. And the cook is there, right?
Right.
The cook is watching because this is a whole spectacle, and he's just like, zip, keep my mouth shut. Not going to say a word.
As the queen is just
chucked into the fire. And so then the cook comes along. He's like, you're going in too. And he's like, whoa, pump the brakes there, homeboy.
I did not cook your children.
And the cook's wife comes through and she's like, oh, look, here's your children. And they're like, oh my God, we're a happy family now. And like,
yep. He gives a great reward to the cook and appointing him as his steward. Married Talia. She enjoyed a long life with her husband and children and after all the trials that she had realized. The end.
Not the end, because there's a moral at the very bottom. Even when asleep, a person can be struck by luck. And I wrote next to it, the fuck they can. The fuck they can.
I wrote, what the fuck?
Okay, let's get into some thoughts here.
So we talked about fruit and territory and...
Let's talk about a little bit of symbolism here. So we had the spindle, right? The spindle where you'll see the spindle come up in every single one of these stories. The spindle represents unchanging lawfulness, inexorable fate, and eternal return. So like eternal sleep and coming back from it and It's also a sex symbol at times. In this story, Talia, clearly a victim. Queen, clearly a victim. The cook, hero for the twins. Mm-hmm. The king, I said, is the villain. Full send.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, this is what I got. The moral out of this story, this is a story that is being told to kids. Now, you have to understand, fairy tales were written by men, as it's been made very clear.
Right.
And then they were orated by women, because children trusted the voice of a woman more than they trusted the voice of a man. So the men would write it, the women would orate it, the children would absorb it. Mm-hmm. So all little boys and little girls back in this time, all they're hearing is, moral of the story is the king can do all the shit that he wants to do. And if anybody snitches on him and like has any kind of moral compass, they're going to be punished for it because he needs to be able to do whatever. Like this just says women aren't worth shit except for what value the man, the king, gives them.
Men and women in general. Wise men predict all of this. An old woman causes
the problem.
Okay, so let's move on to Sleeping Beauty, which is written by Charles Perrault. So Perrault was born in 1628. Important to know that he was 4 when Basile died. So their timelines overlap.
Very much.
Yeah.
Perrault was at that age where parents would start telling fairy tales. How many fairy tales was he hearing that originated from Basile?
Yeah, so Perrault was a French poet, writer, storyteller. He's best remembered for a collection of fairy tales that I think most of our listeners would probably know as the Tales of Mother Goose.
Yes.
All right, so he grew up hearing Sun, Moon, Talia, and here's what Charles Perrault did with it.
So once again, we have the parents are having difficulty having a child. So they finally are able to conceive a daughter. After this conception, they have a party where they invite fairies to come and bless their child, bless her with gifts, wishes, things like that.
Right.
And there was one old. Well, she's older. She's an elder fairy, you know, she's living with her grays and her strays up in her little castle. Nobody ever sees her. So they're like, well, you know, I don't think she wants to come. I don't even think she responded to the invite. And so they had like these treasures basically designed for the fairies as gifts for like, you know, it's like their little gift bag for showing up at like high end. Like,
their
you know,
swag.
The swag bag. Like
Right.
it's like, you know, Prada cologne or perfume. I don't know what they wear. I'm not going to judge them.
Ode to fairy.
Ode to fairy. Old lady fairy, she shows up anyway. She's like, I'm crashing this party. She's
Right.
like, and I'm going to make it a bad time for everybody. So as they're like going through and blessing her, the youngest fairy decreed that she would be the most beautiful. The next said, have the temperament of an angel. The third said she would evince the most admirable grace in all she did. The fourth said she would dance to perfection. The fifth, that she would sing like a nightingale. The sixth said that she would play every instrument in the most exquisite manner possible. And I wrote, no intelligence or smarts or
Exactly. All speaking to perfection. And
and entertainment for a man.
Exactly. She will both look beautiful and add beauty to a man's experience.
Yeah, all that.
That's
that part.
That is her contribution to her world. And then finally, the old fairy
was about to start muttering her curse, where if she pricks her finger on her 15th birthday, I believe it was,
she'll die.
She'll die. But while this was happening, like the seventh fairy that was expected to give her a blessing was like kind of like, you know, act natural. Knowing, because she could hear, I think she could hear the old lady like muttering
to herself.
Yeah, she's like, oh, she's gonna say some shit. This bitch is about to pop off.
Right.
And so finally, the seventh comes forward and she's like, hold on. So she's not gonna die, but she will sleep for 100 years.
Right. At the end of that time, a king's son will come to awake her.
Of course.
Yes.
So
we jump ahead to where she's 16 years old.
She's 16 years old and she's exploring the castle, and she goes up to the top of this tower where there's a locked door, but the key is in the door. She opens it to find
An old woman
spinning, and she said, oh, hey, what are you doing? Can you teach me? Now, it's important to note that once again, tempting fate, the king and queen had all the spindles removed from the castle, from the land, or whatever, but there was only one that was left up in a locked tower.
With this old woman who did not know.
She had no idea
of any of this.
Like, she's like, I'm just up here, like, you know, my spin class, getting my like
it's a little bit of a hole in the story, but we're gonna give
there was a few
Pearl
places
to pass that, you know,
there's
in
a few
16
places where
years,
I was like, how'd that work?
Yeah. So she grasps a spindle, pricks her hand, and at this point she fainted. So the old woman calls for help, but it's too late. A lot of the plot points is along the Sleeping Beauty that
alone
we grew up. The whole kingdom went to sleep, but not mom and dad in this version.
Yeah,
they're like we're good.
We're gonna
believe all of the handmaidens and all of the.
Yeah, make sure they'll be taken care of.
All the stewards and everybody, put them to sleep so when she wakes up, they all wake up and they're people to take care of her.
You know,
but we're out.
Yes.
All right, so at the end of the 100 years, another family's taken over. Which is, I mean, mom and dad left.
Multiple families have taken over.
Which means the kingdom did not go to sleep.
It didn't.
Over 100 years, the throne has now passed down to a new family whose son inquired about the tower that nobody came in and out of.
Yeah, the king's son gets curious and he's like, well, let me see if I can do it, right? Let me see if I can get in there. And he does, right, because the curse is lifting. Yeah.
So in the most lackluster adventure ever, he walks up as he approaches the wood, the great trees and all the brambles and thorns opened up of their own accord and allowed him in.
Well, it's important to note that there was like bodies hanging from previous princes that have tried, just, you know, dead in the bramble. And he walks up like, I got this, got my machete, my weed whacker, my lawnmower, I'm going in. And then it's just like, here's the door.
Yeah, I wrote, at least Disney added a dragon.
Yeah, I mean.
It follows up with, for a young and amorous prince is always courageous. Courageous about what?
Yeah,
that was the most
by the way, this prince is in love. No, he's horny. He's like, oh, there's a sleeping brat up there. I can get into that.
Yeah. But this entire paragraph is about how courageous the prince was to approach the thorns.
A door that opened for him.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most mediocre adventure ever.
It did mention he had to stop before the door opened, right?
So he's approaching, kneels down beside her, and at that moment, the enchantment ends and the princess wakes up. He didn't even have to kiss her. Perrault has written the door opens, the girl wakes up. He didn't open a door.
He's just like,
he didn't kiss her. This guy showed up in the most straight white man experience ever.
Yeah. Like he like just walked in and he's like, yo, and she's like, I'm in love. And I'm like, well, you've been asleep for 100 years. And I'm pretty sure she's aware in her sleep because she dreams of him. Is that right? Is that from this one?
Yeah, because there's the line that the good fairy had procured her the pleasure of very agreeable dreams upon her long slumber. So she recognized him because she was having agreeable dreams of this guy. So again, incredibly easy.
Yes. Immediately they get married.
Immediately married.
There's no engagement. He's just like, let's do this. And she's like, yeah. And then he's like, okay, here's the thing though. Yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah.
I'll be back, but I gotta go. And he goes home to his dad and his mom is like half ogress, right?
Right.
She's half ogre. So that's what we call an ogress.
And she's been wanting him to get married. She's been pushing the issue,
yes.
But he's sort of scared to have this conversation because he doesn't want her to arrange a marriage from her.
Yeah, from her perspective. And then his perspective, he's worried about like the ogre's need to eat children.
Right.
So he doesn't want to like get married, have kids, blah, blah, blah. But he's already married now. And he explored the fruits of her labors or whatever. And like,
but he hides her for 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. Kids are walking, almost talking.
Yeah. Preschool age children. And he's hiding it simply because
pre-K.
He doesn't want to introduce ogress mom to this whole situation.
That part. Mm-hmm. And
their daughter's name is Aurora.
And that's where the name Aurora came from. I believe Aurora is Disney's name for Sleeping Beauty.
It is. Aurora's Disney's Sleeping Beauty.
Because they couldn't have her having a kid or getting pregnant because that would mean sex.
Right. So mom does find out after the king dies.
Yeah. King dies.
And mom immediately goes to, I want to eat Aurora. Cook, serve me up baby Aurora.
Yeah.
We jump right to that. Like dad's funeral's not even over yet. She finds out about the family and is like,
yeah.
Bring me the children.
And he's like, no, mom, you can't do that or whatever. And so the prince has to go off to war. And so like he leaves and she's like, oh shit, I'm tempted. So she sends away Aurora, her mom, and her brother.
To the country house.
And
the queen last days before her
just cravings
kick in. And she sends the cook to
go chop up the babies.
Once again.
And he's like, I can throw some lamb together. Like she won't know. And she's like, oh, this is delicious and stuff. And he's like, oh, yeah, eat every bite, fucking psycho.
Yep.
And so then she's like, crap, dude, those kids are delicious. But really, the cook hides them with her.
Hides the children. And even Sleeping Beauty thinks that the children have been eaten.
Yes.
She's like despondent because her kids have disappeared in the night, and she puts two and two together. She knows what happened.
Oh, she is fully aware. Mm-hmm. So then the queen is like, still hungry. I want Sleeping Beauty now. And so the cook is like, well, shit, like she's not like baby soft. I don't know how the fuck I'm going to pull this one off. And he's like, I'm just going to have to kill her. I'm just going to have to go for it.
Right.
Like I'll protect the kids. I can't really protect her. He goes to her. She turns on the waterworks.
No, she says, do your duty. Then I'll be with my children. I mean, she
was like, yeah, give me to my kids. And he's like, about that. I have your kids.
She's like, I don't want to live anyway. And then all of a sudden he tells her that. And now she's in on the plan. So he says, you shall see your children again in my own house because I've hidden them and I shall again deceive the queen mother by hiding you. So he cooked a hind. Mm-hmm. So she felt content. She was like, I plan on telling the king when he comes back that wolves ate his wife and children. I'm sure he'll believe me and we're good.
But one evening when she was prowling around, just sniffing out like the staff's kids or whatever,
she could hear Aurora.
She heard a voice that she recognized. The voice of Aurora, who had gotten in trouble, and Sleeping Beauty was like, hey, I'm gonna whoop that ass. Come here. Like chasing her around with the slipper and everything.
So the queen puts together the vat with all of the
snakes and lizards and poisonous frogs and
vipers, serpents, intending to fling the queen and her children and the cook and his wife, any maidservant that had helped with this elaborate plan. She wants to just put them all in this big boiling vat of nasty.
Yeah,
so she's got this whole plan concocted when the king rides back into town.
Yeah, and Perrault kind of rushes the end here.
Yeah. So he rides in and
entered the courtyard on horseback
and demands to know the meaning of the spectacle.
He had ridden post haste.
I can only imagine what this looked like with this big, huge cauldron of nastiness and the queen standing there with pretty much everyone waiting to be thrown in.
Nobody dared to tell him. And then the ogress queen, enraged at the sight of the king's return,
flings herself in the vat. Ah, crap, I'm caught, and just throws herself in the pot.
I mean, be control of your own destiny, I guess, because she wasn't in control of anybody else's.
And then this is the end. The king could not help but feel sorry For she was his mother, but he quickly consoled himself in the company of his beautiful wife and children. The end.
And here comes the moral, my favorite part. To wait so long and want a man refined and strong is not at all uncommon. And yet to wait 100 years without a tear, without a care, makes for a very rare woman. This is saying, hang on to your virginity, ladies. So here our tale appears to show how marriage deferred brings joy unheard, nothing lost after a century or so. But others love with more ardor and wed quickly out of passion. What they do I won't deplore, nor shall I preach a lesson. Basically, it's saying somehow from this, from Charles Perrault's story, like the chariot is a spiritual elevation of the individual. So I think being asleep for 100 years, I would consider that spiritual elevation.
Well, I think we see a lot more like references to purity, to virginity. As you go from Basile to Perrault, there's a lot more purity.
Yeah, there's more purity in the story of Basile is very much like, hey, you're lucky that even a man wanted you. Okay.
Right.
He came and took you.
And a man can do
whatever
whatever he wants, and he doesn't even have to show you anything.
Because it could be worse. Like a woman could come along and try to have you killed and your babies.
Right. So Basile starts there. Perrault introduces the hint of love. So everything kind of gets watered down.
Yeah.
The lie is not that I'm married. I'm hiding you because of my mom.
Yes, very that.
Right. The naked woman found and raped gets watered down into this version. So everything just gets purified a little bit.
Yeah. Like,
when you move into Perrault's story.
Perrault is like, whoa, hold on. We now believe in religion and bastardized children.
Exactly.
And like, they need to get married first. And yo, girls, like, listen, to wait so long and want a man refined and strong is not at all uncommon. Like, you guys should. Everyone's doing it. Everyone's preserving their virginity.
Mm-hmm.
And yet to wait 100 years without a tear, without a care, makes for a very rare woman. You are going to be the one everybody wants because you keep yourself pure and clean.
Well, and compare that to our first moral, which was even when asleep, a person can be struck by luck. I keep coming back to the word purity.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's so aggressive in the first one. And this one's like
the juxtaposition there.
Yeah. It's like Perrault took the story and just sort of altered it just enough. He didn't change a lot of the structure to it. He just added a lot of flowery language and purity.
You know what I think happened?
I like your religion comment.
He was, well, that's what I was going to get at. He was, readapting it. Sporting a little flagpole, and he was like, God's watching me. I need to water this down.
Because when he stumbles across her, they immediately
fall in love.
Get married.
Yeah, immediately get married. And then I don't know if they had time to fall in love. She's just like, you're the first dude I've seen in 100 years, and I've been dreaming about you. But to go to the second half of the moral, it says, so here our tale appears to show how marriage deferred brings joy unheard, nothing lost after a century or so. But others love with more ardor and wed quickly out of passion. Whatever they do, I won't deplore, nor shall I preach a lesson. Basically, they're saying, like, preserve your virginity until you're married. And he's like, but hey, you guys just want to jump in and get married real quick so you can bang one out. Go for it.
Right.
And it almost didn't work out for her. It did, but it almost didn't.
Right.
Again, in this situation, the cook was like hands down the hero.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, what did the king do? He left his family in possession of his mom, who he knows has like a taste for the human flesh.
What strikes me, I know we're talking about the fruitful sleep, and we've discussed the fruitful part of it, but the motif that I think keeps popping up in this, the motif of waiting, the consistency of not being able to have a daughter. That's where most of these stories start. Waiting to get pregnant, trying to get pregnant, and what each of these authors do with the concept of having to wait. It's 100 years. She waits to wake up to fall in love.
Yeah. And it's also like, I feel like the message it's sending to like the children listening to it. Cause I mean, back then people were getting married at like 14, 15, 16. And she's 15, 16 here when she gets married. They're saying like, if she could wait 100 years, you guys can wait 3 weeks until you've said your nuptials. Okay.
And Talia is found in the woods. The fruitful sleep part of it, but she has to wait until she's awake with children to have value to him. Sleeping Beauty had to wait out the 100 years. The villain is waiting.
Yeah. Let's get into the third installment.
All right. So the third and final story is Briar Rose, which is written by the brothers Grimm. Jacob, born in 1785, and Wilhelm?
Wilhelm.
Born in 1786. So the brothers were German folklorists. They are best known for their Grimm's fairy tales, which I think is what most of us know them by. They're very important scholars of their time, and I think it's important to note that they were more realists than romantics when it came to writing these stories.
Yes.
So let's talk about what they did with both Perrault's version, that, based on the timeline, for those of you paying attention, had aged a little bit. Perrault had died in 1703, and the Brothers Grimm did not come along until 1785. So by now, they sort of have the antiquity versions of both of these stories.
Yes, that part.
Here's what they did with it.
So in Briar Rose, the parents, again, can't conceive, right? Finally, they're blessed with a daughter.
By a frog.
By a frog. As the story goes, a king and queen hold an event, like a party, a christening almost.
We have 12 fairies this time.
12 fairies come in.
And a 13th.
Well, there's 13 fairies in total. This time, the parents made an active decision to leave somebody out because they only had 12 places at the table.
Yeah.
Which I feel like you could have turned 2 corners into 2 spots. You know what I mean?
Anybody who's planned a wedding knows that you could have made it work.
Yeah, you guys couldn't find different tables? Aren't you a king and a queen? I'm sorry. Is there no tree outside for you to chop down? Anyway, so...
She gets her revenge for being left off the guest list.
Yeah. Oh, she was
by RSVPing.
She shows up. Full Chanel gown, right? Just full Chanel gown with a little brooch clasp right under the deep plunging neckline.
Right.
And she was like, yeah, I'm the hottest bitch in here. This is why you didn't invite me, clearly.
Oh, yeah. Double doors open.
Oh, yeah. Just
music stops.
Yeah. Fall leaves come rustling up around her. It's the middle of spring. Figure that out. Right. And she comes in and she's like, hey, y'all did me dirty. Why didn't you invite me? Is it because I'm if it's because I'm the pretty one?
And I'm going to do what makes the most sense. And I'm going to curse the baby.
Yes.
So she curses her to death.
By touching a spindle. One of the 12 was like, I'm going to go hide behind a fucking curtain.
Right.
I was going to give her intelligence, but because everybody else failed to give her that again.
Yeah, I love that the one that was going to give her smarts was I'm going to use those to hide.
Yeah.
Which, once again,
softens the curse. And she's like, maybe just 100 years.
Right.
Love that.
She will fall into a deep sleep for 100 years.
Yeah. And then, so this story is very rushed. I feel I'm pretty sure.
And a lot of the parts that we're familiar with, the king orders everything out of there. He doesn't want, trying to do everything to not fall into what has been predicted is that on her birthday, she will prick her finger and she will fall into a sleep. She eventually comes across the tower, climbs it, wandering around because, again, the curiosity is there because everybody's been trying to keep her from this fate that has pretty much been decided for her.
Yeah.
So she comes across an old spinster and says, what are you doing here? And she says, I'm spinning. So at that very moment, she pricks her finger, she falls down into the bed, and she's overcome by this deep 100-year sleep.
Yes. And
immediately the sleep spreads through the whole palace.
At this point, this is a difference that, the brothers brought in and they're like, let's keep mom and dad involved, which I'm cool because I feel like having the presence of mom and dad, there's still that authority adult figure in Briar's life. So that way when the prince shows up, he can't just he's got to go get permission.
It's an interesting evolution of the family unit when you compare what happens to her when sleep hits.
Yes.
From the father who strips her naked and leaves her in the middle of a courtyard.
And books it.
To mom and dad who say, we're going to leave you with people that'll take care of you when you wake up, but we're taking off.
Yeah, we can't.
To now, it's an interesting evolution of the depiction of family
that
relationships.
Vacation to Boca Raton was not going to happen on its own. They already made reservations.
So now mom and dad come back and the whole place is plunged into this sleep and the briar hedge begins to grow around the castle. And it grows higher and higher and higher every year.
With every year. And the crazy part about this is anybody that was on castle grounds, anybody that was there to know what was going on, any of them, they're all trapped in this castle. But somehow, the land out and about around it know what the story is. It says here, the princess became known by the name Beautiful Sleeping Briar Rose, and a tale about her began circulating throughout the country to where I was like, how? Had someone snuck in? Everyone there to see, everyone that was there to see, fell asleep.
Yeah. Little hole in the story.
Yeah. And the prince shows up, just really good timing, I think.
Oh, yeah. The 100 years is about to lapse, and here comes the
Yeah,
prince.
he shows up the day it's lifting.
Yeah.
And then, like...
And he's like, I am not afraid.
It's 100 years to the second.
But for the first...
So he got there like an hour early. And he's like walking around. He's like, yeah, I'm going to make my move. And right when he makes his move, she wakes up.
But this is the first time we see intention. I'm not afraid, said the young prince when he approaches. I intend to go and see the beautiful Briar Rose. For the first time, the Grimms write a prince who is there for the Sleeping Beauty. Because that's the evolution of that, right?
Yeah. Yes. He leaned over and he gave her a kiss. And when his lips touched hers, Briar Rose opened her eyes, woke up, and looked at him fondly.
And I wrote in the margin, once again, 0 degree of difficulty.
So once she woke up, everybody else woke up. And I'm like, I feel like that.
And this is the Disney ending that we're used to.
I'm like, that I feel like is the evidence that his kiss really didn't do shit for the situation. That like, he just had really good timing.
Right.
Because like, if your kiss woke her up, then your kiss should have woken up everybody, including the flies on the wall. Like
the day on which Briar Rose was to awake again, he had arrived. So there you
go.
go.
It was
already there. Everybody was going to wake up again.
Even if he didn't show up there,
everybody would have woke up.
Everybody would have woke up.
This wraps up in a paragraph the way the Disney version does. Wake up, look at each other, fall in love, get married, happily ever after.
Happily ever after. And that's where so it says right here, the last sentence is, and it says, the wedding of the prince with Briar Rose was celebrated in great splendor, and they lived happily to the end of their days. This is like around the time that they started saying happily ever after. That's how they used to say it. Mm-hmm. And I wrote, wow, really phoned this one in, didn't they?
Yeah. Okay. So those are the 3 tellings of this Sleeping Beauty, Fruitful Sleep.
All the symbolism is the same. Again, you have the spindle, the towers, the parents are present, which I feel like there was intention there, but they never really like describe what the intention is. Mm-hmm. Maybe they saw like how desperately these parents wanted their children, mm-hmm. wanted this child, and was like, they went down with her, a parent's sacrifice for their own kid. I feel like that could have been explored more, but like, that's why I'm like, oh, they really phoned this one in. They didn't really like, I don't feel like the Brothers Grimm, because it's the shortest version of them all. Well, and it was getting shorter by the adaptation. There's
no angry wife. There's no mother-in-law. The villain is waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. The villain is waiting.
She's cursed to wait 100
years.
Well,
the villain is like, did my job. I got to go. Like that was the, full length Chanel.
For sure. Who cursed her with death and, nope, she's just going to sleep for 100 years. And when she wakes up, that's the end.
That's it. Like, yeah.
The challenge was even the prince didn't have a dragon to slay or a moat to swim across. He needed to show up at the right time.
Yeah. Like, it's like, they talk about the hero's journey being a part of every single story that you read. I'm like I've failed to identify a lot of things. I understand the Immaculate Conception where the frog, and then, they have the baby, and then you have the helpers come along, which are the
fairies.
The fairies. I would want to place crossing the threshold at the moment she was cursed. Although
the moment she goes to sleep,
the moment she was cursed was like the call to action. So right. The Immaculate Conception call to action. And then when she when she touches the spindle and she goes to sleep.
Now we're in
the we cross the threshold, but like her only duty and everyone's only duty is to sleep for 100 years and then wake up.
Right. And protect her children, but that's been removed.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong.
There's no children there because
I don't mind that we don't have the fruitfulness of the sleep, but that was at least part of her journey when she woke up. Both Talia and Perrault.
Yeah,
she woke up, and to some degree, she needed to protect her children.
Yeah, there was no apple to fall from the rape tree in this one.
Yeah,
which was a nice touch. I found it interesting that when talking about like the way the information was presented about the Fruitful Sleep motif, they said that Wilhelm and Jacob, the Brothers Grimm, they removed the situation of consent. They refined it by taking out the rape is the words that were used in like the motif setup. But Perrault actually got rid of that. Mm-hmm. And they brought back no consent because he just leaned over and just like kissed her.
Right.
Like,
which one of these 3 is your favorite?
Ooh, which one of these 3 are my favorite? I really hate the rape scene in
Sun Moon Talia.
Yeah. Basile's, but I feel like Basile's had more elements to an actual story involved.
For sure.
So I'm gonna go with Basile just because he told more of a story. I'm not really a big fan of the direction he went in or the moral he was trying to put out there. But sometimes the best stories written are the ones that aren't really something you should agree with.
I love that you're going with it because of story, because I'm choosing Perrault because of character. Perrault's my favorite because of all three versions of Sleeping Beauty, I feel like she's more of a character in Perrault.
Yeah.
She becomes a mother willingly after marrying him, and she has more of a motherly reaction to her children.
Yes.
Despondent when they're gone, hides them away, actively helps the cook and his wife
and that's really weird because she didn't really have a mom to like, because her mom was like, abandon this bitch, I'm out. Oh, maybe she was like breaking the cycle. Oh,
I felt the best Sleeping Beauty was Perrault's because she actually had some sort of character.
Yeah.
She had some sort of struggle. You watched her attack that struggle versus, Basile's, which is like, oh, I kind of missed my kids, but I was really just thinking about the king.
Well, she cried and then she got over it.
Yeah. So
there's a lot more symbolism in Perrault. Like you have the introduction of this is perfect for how intentional symbolism is. So in Perrault, that's where the first introduction of a tower, which represents virginity. Perrault, she was a virgin and then married.
Yeah.
And then that happened. In the Brothers Grimm, there's another tower. She's a virgin. There's no sign of sexual activity at all other than him kissing her.
Right.
In Basile's, there is no tower, and King's going back for seconds.
Right.
So from a story structure standpoint, Basile is my favorite. From a symbolism standpoint, I would have to say Perrault is my favorite because Perrault actually employed more symbolism that was fully relevant to the way the story was being told.
Okay.
So
yeah. Shall we do bookends?
Ooh, let's do bookends.
All right. This is where we ask the questions that we think y'all should be asking yourself when you read these stories. So, the collection of Sleeping Beauty stories, The Fruitful Sleep, who would you recommend these stories to?
I know who I'd recommend these stories to.
Who?
A Disney adult.
I love that answer. I love that answer.
Know the origins of where it came from.
I too think that fans of the Disney version should read these because I think it's important to see which elements were taken out and put into that story. And not just the origins, but why some of those elements were put into the Disney version. All right, question number 2. What questions do we think our listeners should take to their book clubs if they choose to discuss the Fruitful Sleep motif stories?
Ooh, I have like 2 really good ones. So one, I want everyone to focus on the similarities of all the stories and the differences of all the stories. And when you as you progress through each story, when you get to the later one, the shortest one, the one that was really phoned in, you can see some elements from Basile there, but you also see some elements from Perrault there.
I like that.
So which elements from Perrault do you see in the Brothers Grimm, and which elements of Basile do you see in the Brothers Grimm, and how are they all different? That's another one. Like, how are they the same and how are they different?
I like that.
So that's a fun one.
Okay.
Also, did you guys purchase your Herder dictionaries yet? How many other symbols can you find in the stories?
I like it.
And how are they relevant to the story? That's also another good exercise for using the Herder dictionary of symbols. You have all of those different definitions or meanings behind each symbol. And when you have all those meanings behind each symbol, when you're reading through them, you have to be able to figure out which one applies to the actual story. And then you insert that into the way you're reading the story. That is the knowledge that you hold on to while you're reading. Usually, if it's an odd image, if it's a phallic image, which would be like a sword or a tower or a post or a lance or a spear or whatever, that would be a phallic symbol. A yonic symbol would be something like a cup, a grail, a cave, a body of water, a pit of fire, a hearth. Those are all, and why do we have those? When you see these symbols, a specific type of bird, not just a bird, but a specific type of bird, look up into that bird. A fantastical creature like a dragon, or something that seems out of place, like a chariot comes along. Why is that important? You want to look those up because those will give you some insight into where the direction of the story is going to go, and holding on to the meaning of these symbols as you are going through the story, you start to see them pop up in other stories. You start to have a little bit more understanding for the structure of the story and how that all plays together. And it changes the story from being such a surface level story to having a much more in-depth meaning to you. It'll resonate with you better.
Absolutely. My question is, if we treat Disney as the fourth storyteller in the evolution of how we saw family values.
I wanted to do this one. Okay.
Jesus.
I thought about it. I'll wait till next week. I'll wait till next week.
Yeah, because mine's actually very specific to this one.
Okay.
Which is...
I would hope so. It would make no sense if it was it's Rumpelstiltskin or something.
You know, you don't have to talk the whole time.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I do.
Okay, so treating Disney as the fourth storyteller. My question is,
Spit it out.
men. In Disney's version, he has
okay.
a dragon to slay. He has an evil sorceress who, fire, brimstone. The Briars come alive and try to like ensnare him. He has an actual quest to achieve to get to Sleeping Beauty.
He has a hero's journey.
He totally finally has a hero's journey. Whereas if you walk it backwards to Grimm and then walk it backwards to Perrault, it gets easier and easier and easier. And what
True.
does that say about that patriarchy and the evolution,
That's good.
of how men's success is perceived?
Because the further back you go, the less that they have to do.
They just show up.
And I
Don't even have to marry her.
I mean, you have to remember that the Disney versions started coming out around the 40s and into the 50s and things like that. So the Disney versions that you're watching are going to be like
200 years after Grimm's story.
Yeah. It's important, and I should have noted this in the very beginning of this episode, but it's important to note that adaptations, when they are written, they follow current social constructs.
Yeah, we joked around about mediocre men, but truly, if you follow the hero's journey of the king or prince, it gets easier and easier and easier the further back you go.
Because these young ladies are coming from royalty. They're coming from wealth. There's nothing that needs to be provided to them that they don't already have when they wake up. And so, and it's usually another king who already has things through generational wealth and so on and so forth that is taking care of them financially or whatever. So when you go into Disney's version, which is more the 40s, the 50s, it was expected of a woman to marry a man and to depend on a man. And this man had to work hard to earn the money and provide. And it plays more into the everyday person story versus we just come from royalty, blah, blah, blah. They had to make some form of work for the woman to have to rely on that man's work.
Question 3.
Okay.
Casting call. Who would you cast for the Sleeping Beauty character, the prince/king character, and the queen in these 3 versions? Start with Sun, Moon, Talia.
Sun, Moon, Talia.
So who's Talia?
Well, I can tell you who I would put for the king.
Okay.
Sean, what was his name? Sean Bean.
Okay. Sean Bean. That's a good
I
one.
would put Sean Bean for the king. I would probably cast...
I had one of the Olsen twins.
Ooh, which one? The creepy one or the other creepy one?
Either one. They could trade out like they did on Full House.
Yeah.
But just that like wispy sort of like vacant expression.
Yeah. And then for like the queen, I would choose Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates.
I'm sick of my...
All right.
Kathy Bates. I'm going with Kathy Bates.
All right. So
for Perrault, I would make the prince Macaulay Culkin.
Okay.
Innocent Macaulay Culkin. I would make what's her name? Married to Ashton Kutcher.
Oh, Mila Kunis.
Mila Kunis.
Great answer.
Yes. So I would do Mila Kunis.
And the ogress?
The ogress, Roseanne Barr.
Nice. I love it. That's perfect imagery.
Who did you have for the princess?
For Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty,
It's hard to top Mila Kunis, so I'm going to ride with you on that one.
Okay, Mila Kunis.
Because the mother in that story, like, I got you on that one.
Yeah.
Now, for Brothers Grimm, it's hard to see anybody other than Angelina Jolie for the fairy that curses her.
Yes. I mean, her walking in that floor-length Chanel. That was a moment.
Well, she plays Maleficent in the Disney version.
I know she plays Maleficent, but like...
Yeah. Now, who do you see playing Sleeping Beauty in the Grimm story?
Ooh, Sleeping Beauty in the Grimm story? Like, she doesn't really do anything, does she? She just runs around and touches shit.
Neither does the prince.
Neither does the prince. Pete Davidson. I'm going to make the prince Pete Davidson.
I like it.
Where he's like, but like Pete Davidson is like, yeah, whatever. That guy, like that character, Pete Davidson, is like,
Sure.
I
like it.
And then
we're getting better and better at casting call.
We are. For the princess,
I like Kristen Stewart for that one.
Kristen Stewart. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Just to like, okay.
Kristen Stewart's cool, I guess.
Her and Pete Davidson is a pair right there.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you for joining us on another riveting episode of Cracking Spines podcast with me, the most amazing human being in the world, and my co-host, Frank, or whatever his name is.
Also known as Candice, the one who puts up with your shit every single week.
This is my turn to talk.
Oh, your turn to talk.
Someone has to be the personality around here. Anyway, Be sure to follow us on all our social medias. You can find those over on our link tree at linktr.ee/cracking spines. Also, for all of your reading materials, books, reference books, you can go visit our store at kit.co/cracking spines podcast. That's kit.co/cracking spines podcast. Next week, we will be diving into the neglected daughters motif, as you all know as Cinderella.
From the same book.
From the same book. We're
one book for the whole month.
We will again be tackling Basile, Perrault, and Grimm.
Awesome. And that is all the time we have for now. Thank you guys for listening along as we talked about the Fruitful Sleep. Join us next week. We're out.
We're out. If you've ever wanted to like field goal somebody across, I don't know, into an alligator pit.
Okay. 2/4 of the way in. You're like, oh my God.
Did you say 2/4?
2/4 of the
You
way
mean
in.
1/2?
1/2. I meant to say.
How much homophobia do I have to face? I just got forced to do math for somebody.
You did.
That's a hate crime. So you got to give her some props. I mean, this has got all kinds of messy written all over it, but as long as she keeps her cards in a row.
Yeah.
Or whatever the expression is.
Ducks.
Ducks? Sure. Hey, ducks. Hey, guys. Come here, duck. Shout out to the OGs.